I noticed that I'm kind of hovering over the book. I just watched a couple of the past videos. But the sound is decent. It's not great, but we're just going to keep on going for now. And so, this is the tapas, the last one I'm going to do right now. And Tapasya, Tapasya. Shortened word for that is tapas. It's a very interesting word and makes me feel interesting. It's just a very interesting thing. The simple and most direct type of renunciation would seem to be to just give up the satisfying of one's desires. That is, if one is preoccupied with eating and oral gratifications, just fast. If one is obsessed with sexual concerns, just give up sex, and so on. This technique is known as Tapasya, or straightening by fire. Quote, if a man gives way to all his desires or panders to them, there will be no inner struggle in him, no friction, no fire. But if for the sake of attaining a definite aim he struggles with the desires that hinder him, he will then create a fire which will gradually transform his inner world into a single whole. Ouspensky. The struggle that comes through imposing austerities on oneself as a systematic part of one's sadhana is a powerful form of inner confrontation. It certainly shows you where you are not. For example, if you usually get up at 8 a.m., as everyone does, try getting up at 4 a.m. every morning. Buddha and other high beings have noted that the best time of day to work on oneself is between 4 and 7 in the morning. Or perhaps you like sleeping on a really comfortable bed. Start sleeping on a thin mat on the floor. But there are two warnings to be kept in mind with regard to any austerities. Austerities can be performed in ways to enhance or strengthen the ego. Pride in how much one is suffering and masochism are two examples. Quote, another thing that people must sacrifice is their suffering. No one who has not sacrificed his suffering can work. Nothing can be attained without suffering, but at the same time one must begin by sacrificing suffering. Ouspensky. Number 2. Austerities that are excessive in relation to the degree of spiritual development of the individual are merely demonstrations of ego will, and as such can harm the body or the mind in such a way as to make further sadhana in this lifetime difficult or even impossible. Quote, and even in his corrections let him act with prudence and not go too far, lest while he seeketh too eagerly to scrape off the rust, the vessel be broken. Rule for the Abbot, chapter 64. Two examples. There is a method of meditation in which a sadhak sits in the lotus position in the desert and looks directly into the sun without blinking from sunrise to sunset. Now it is obvious that if most people were to try this, they would blind themselves through burning their retina. This particular exercise is only safe to do when one has evolved to such a point that his mind is totally one-pointed, unless he can keep his eyes open and directed at the sun without ever even once looking at the sun. Pranayama, which utilizes control of the breath in order to control pran or life force, involves in its advanced forms the stopping of the breath for extended periods of time. One arrives at these very delicate forms of pranayama only after considerable purification of body and mind, for they require that the breath stop, although the sadhak feels no experience of holding his breath. One overzealous aspirant injected chemical agents to strengthen his will and override his body's warning system, and then forced himself into deeper and deeper pranayama. He died. And leaving the body this way entails ego, and is thus a subtle form of suicide, which leaves him with more work to do, but no body to do it in, until next time. Such warnings make a person really want a nice, wise, paternal-type teacher to impose discipline, but waiting for such a teacher is usually a cop-out, for at this point practically everything a teacher would say to us we already know. There are many ways on our own that we can get on with it. Later, when we have progressed on the path of purification and really need a teacher, he will appear. In undertaking any tapasya, one is usually overwhelmed by the amount of ego that creeps in. pride, self-pity, wanting to stop because it all seems meaningless or confusing, or is too slow. All of these ego demons and many more drop around to foil any such undertaking. 1,000 times they will succeed and you will give up your program in disgust. But 1,001 times you will return to your efforts because you see how it all is. That's just the way it is. As many times as you trip and fall, i.e., give in to a desire, just get up. There is a tendency when we fall for many of us to sit around and feel guilty and wallow in self-recrimination. Quote, However sinful a person may be, if he would stop wailing inconsolably, Alas, I am a sinner, how shall I attain liberation? And casting away even the thought that he is a sinner, if he would zealously carry on, he would most assuredly be reformed. Ramana Maharishi. Such self-recrimination is just more of the ego dance. Let it go by and get on with it. After all, if you were finished, you wouldn't need to begin. Just accept where you are in the here and now and proceed full speed. And so for those who can undertake austerities without feeling that they are too austere, perhaps even proceed joyfully, here are some suggested exercises. 1. Get in the habit of remaining silent for a few hours a day. This is most easily done when one is at home or around people who understand what you are trying to do. In India, you are silent. In India, if you are silent, everyone immediately says, Muna, and honors you. In the West, people either interpret silence as a sign of your hostility towards them or as a physical illness about which they feel pity. Either of these reactions makes your work more difficult. At first, you may want to remain by yourself during these few hours. Later, you will be able to be around people comfortably without having to speak. Soon you may feel that you are ready to undertake one day of silence a week. Some spiritual communities have incorporated a day of silence into their program for the entire group. Many communities take meals in silence. If you wish to undertake longer periods of silence, you may wish to work with a chalkboard. A piece of light slate about 4 to 5 inches can be worn on a piece of twine or rope around the neck, with a piece of chalk also attached to the twine. You can convey any necessary messages of practical import. This device, although somewhat cumbersome, is an excellent technique for showing a person of his own verbosity. To have to write down every communication quickly leads one to convey the essence of communication without all the redundancies and amplifications. With such a device, Haridas Baba has carried on much worldly work for 15 years without speaking. The effects of this very modest tapasya will quickly be manifested in the forms of more calmness of mind and more energy, and the ability to hear more around you. Other exercises of tapas are included in other sections of this cookbook. And I imagine a person could just write in a little notebook to have a little notebook, and then they wouldn't have to worry about something around their neck, but that's completely up to anyone. Potent quotes. Conserve your powers. Daily renewed sense yearnings sap your inner peace. They are like openings in a reservoir that allow vital waters to be washed away. Conserve your powers. Daily renewed sense yearnings sap your inner peace. They are like openings in a reservoir that allow vital waters to be washed. Conserve your powers. Daily renewed sense yearnings sap your inner peace. They are like openings in a reservoir that allow vital waters to be wasted in the desert soil of materialism. The forceful activating impulse of wrong desire is the greatest enemy to the happiness of man. Roam in the world as a lion of self-control. Don't let the frogs of sense weakness kick you around. Sraya Yukteswar. I realized in this place that people feared silence more than anything else, that our tendency to talk arises from self-defense, and is always based upon a reluctance to see something, a reluctance to confess something to oneself. Directly a person is quiet himself, that is, awakes a little, he hears the different intonations and begins to distinguish other people's lies. Ouspensky. The more you talk about it, the more you think about it, the further from it you go. Stop talking, stop thinking, and there is nothing you will not understand. Sing San. Drown all sound in my silence to hear my word of words, Meher Baba. The whole world is tormented by words, and there is no one who does without words. But insofar as one is free from words, does one really understand words? Saraha. Treasury of Songs, Volume 88. I guess that V stands for volume. To reconnect consciousness with the unconscious, to make consciousness symbolical, is to reconnect words with silence, to let the silence in. If consciousness is all words and no silence, the unconscious remains unconscious. N. O. Brown. I said, I will take heed to my ways, that I sin not with my tongue. I have placed a watch over my mouth. I became dumb and was silent, and held my peace even from good things. Saint Benedict. Quietness is master of the dead. Tao Te Ching. This is also from Tao Te Ching, and it says, those who know do not talk, and talkers do not know. This is from Portia. He who tells the truth says almost nothing. Another quote, do not squander your treasure. Exuberance is a good stimulus toward action, but the inner light grows in silence and contemplation. Ephraim the Syrian says, good speech is silver, but silence is pure gold. Way of a Pilgrim book. I did not eat, so they said I was fasting. I did not speak, so they said I was Muni. Ramana Maharishi. O Lord, thou shalt open my lips, and my mouth shall declare thy praise. From the Bible.